Welcome to Pagan Coffee Talk. If you enjoy our content, please consider donating and following our socials. Now, here are your hosts, Lady Alba and Lord Knight.
We're actively trying to coax Lord Oswin to join us in this discussion, and it's his day off. I say leave him alone. It's his day off. Let the man have his day off. It's bad enough he's got to sit here and listen to us yammer.
So, my lady.
Yes.
Let's talk about intuition.
Okay, let's.
What is it?
Your gut?
Yeah.
Well, the way I think of it is, let's see it no. It's like a radio signal.
Okay.
And so I see it as like a radio signal or a radio broadcast, but the idea is you have to tune into it. You have to fine tune to it. It's the unfiltered, raw thoughts, emotions, beliefs in your head when all the other noise and all the other static is gone.
Yes.
But it's very hard to tune into that channel for some people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think?
How do you see it? Or am I on track there for you too?
You're on track. It's like that split second of the honest truth of yourself and everything around you just comes through.
Yeah. And it's weird because as children, we don't think about it at all.
No.
It's in a way, instinct can be very animalistic.
Well, I think you're right. It's kind of like those kids who just say what's ever on their mind.
To some extent. But I also see it like action.
Yes.
An infant, a toddler, right, just a child, they know when they're hungry. They know when they're thirsty. They know what their basic needs are. They may not be able to provide it for themselves.
Right.
But they will yield to those needs first and foremost. We talk about adults being hangry or, how we don't get enough sleep and then we get irritable or, all of these things. And it's like, well, have you ever watched a toddler? Like they can be in the middle of doing something and they just go, it's nap time, and they're out.
Yeah.
Instinct takes over. They're not fighting their natural urge anymore. They're just going, yep, time to sleep. I don't care that I'm on the floor. This is what's happening right now.
I don't care that I'm in the middle of eating.
Yeah. Intuition is a weird thing because I feel like modern society does nothing but try to keep us away from it. And then we have to learn it.
All over again.
Kind of. Yeah.
So what's some ways we can learn this?
I spend a lot of time with this in different ways with different students in different environments. And so much of what I see is overthinking, overanalyzing, over-considering, right? The brain just trying to do too many things and juggle too much all at once and take into consideration too many things that are unnecessary. Because that's what we're taught to do. Everything is about expectation and it's about other people's beliefs and society and culture and right. But
then there's that split second where you have that fear. Could I be wrong?
And that's what I mean. When you strip all of that away, you get to the core being. So it's almost like, if you're 30 years old and you've lived 30 years on the planet, you have 30 years of accumulated garbage that is not your own.
Right.
The thoughts underneath all that garbage are your intuition.
Basically.
And this is why meditation is so helpful. This is why that's such an essential practice, because it teaches us to tune in to that voice more and to connect with that voice more and those inner beliefs. I see so much of it. I see so much of it in so many ways. People just constantly second guessing themselves and not trusting themselves. And there's something kind of ironic about that, right? Because it's kind of like you can't, physiologically, right? You can't self-suffocate.
No.
It's not possible. You can't do it. You can't hold your breath.
Right.
Until you stop breathing, because your body won't let you.
Right.
It's going to force you. Again, intuition is kind of the same thing. Now, there are some people who will tell you, right, that their intuition is wired wrong. They're like, I can't listen to my intuition because my intuition tells me to do the wrong thing. And this can be, like people who deal with addiction.
Right.
But that's not entirely true, because the addiction is not their intuition. The addiction is what has rewired their brain.
Right. And
the addiction then is so prominent, it's always in front of their intuition. It's like it's blocking it.
Right.
There's a very common type of spell work that you hear a lot about in pagan circles called an uncrossing.
Yes.
Right? Uncrossing, unblocking, untying. Same thing.
Right.
It's what it is. It's to get down beneath one more layer, right? What's in your way? What's the barrier? What's the thing that's standing between you and what you really need or want or think?
Now, the only way I've ever seen to even begin to attempt to teach someone how to do that is through divination.
Mm-hmm.
Where I sit there and explain to you, I'm going to turn a card over. I just want you to say the first word that comes out of your mouth and forget about wrong or right.
Because it's always easier to do for somebody else. It's ironic. It is. It's always easier. Intuition. We can tap into our own intuition by helping someone else. Because again, it's like if I turn the card over for you and I go, here's the first thing that pops into my head, right? Because it's not for me. It's easier for me to be secure in saying that and in trusting what comes to mind. But if it was for myself or if it was directed inward,
I know where you're going.
Yeah. We would second guess it 700 times.
No. How about this? Throw the cards across the room because you doubted yourself twice now.
Well, it's like, okay. It's like people always say, right? It's easier to help someone else than it is to help themselves. It's the same thing. It's easier to, your friend calls you up and goes, my house is a mess. I need help. Can you come over and help me clean? You go over to their house, you help them clean, you get everything wonderfully organized. But then you go home to your own place and it's a wreck. And you're like, I don't understand. Yeah, because it's always easier to help somebody else get their shit together than it is to get your own shit together.
Does that mean every professional housekeeper out there really has junky houses?
I mean, I'm not going to lie, man. It's, I feel like this is the irony to that question. Their houses are clean, but they're always cluttered. Because they're just like, screw it, I'll put it away tomorrow. Like they don't, yeah.
It's kind of like the chef that comes home and goes, no, we'll just do lean cuisine. I'm done.
Exactly. Like, let's just heat up a frozen burrito, like it's so funny. The mechanic whose, car is literally falling apart and, has one wheel and no power steering. And yeah, that's always how it is. So, and intuition is funny too, because even parents, right? Parents try, I think now more than ever, they try to get their kids to really connect with that, is what do you, trust yourself.
Right.
But it's easier said than done. Okay. So divination. So We can play the first thing that pops into your head game. Which is also sort of the spiritual equivalent of the Rorschach test.
Yes.
Let's be honest, right?
Right.
But we're trying to get beyond just the picture. We're talking when we divine intuitively.
Right. It's
all the senses.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's not just what do I see, it's what do I hear, what do I taste, what do I feel, all of it.
It's sort of like something else takes over, but you're taking over it at the same time. It's really a confusing feeling when it happens for me.
Because most people, when they have tapped into or connected with the divine within, it's spacey, it's fuzzy, it's right, it's ethereal.
There's no hard edges.
No, it's a little like being high.
You're sort of not even sure if there are edges.
Mm-hmm. I mean, me personally, but I'll ask you: have you ever met a psychic or a medium that doesn't come off as a little woo-hoo? A
little,
and kind of flighty, and like, oh, they might walk into that wall, we should steer them. Yeah, they always seem a bit space cadet-y.
I'm surprised more haven't walked into open fires.
I think they have handlers for that. If they're that good anyway, It really is a bit of an out-of-body experience, out of self. And some people are terrified of that.
Yes.
And that's where the resistance comes a lot of times. It took me a long time to learn how to do that because I don't like to give up my control.
No. Most people don't.
And so it's a fight for me just to clear everything away enough that I can get to that place, because for so long I was like, no. I want to keep it. I want to hold it. It's hard.
And it's even 10 times worse when you're not in a known space.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how else to say that.
Yeah. Well, because if you are, again, if you're doing like an intuitive reading for someone else, you are entering their space.
Right.
You are entering a third party's space through that person. It's their doorways. They're like, and you're like, I don't know where I am now. Cool. Let's see what's here.
We only got lost once.
Mm-hmm. It's creepy, but it's creepy. And it can be unsettling, and people are afraid of it. But I think the irony of it is a lot of that fear stems from bullshit.
Maybe.
It's pop culture.
Well, speaking of pop culture, what about these stories we hear about some mom getting a funny feeling and 5 minutes later find out that daughter was in an accident? Or is this a form of intuition?
Yes. But I've always believed in that my whole life. Yeah. I think there are all sorts of ways that we are connected to the other people in our lives, both living and deceased. And there is always communication. We're always receiving messages. We're always sending messages. Again, I go back to the radio signal. We're broadcasting, whether we think we are or not.
Well, see, I think that's where most people have a problem. I think they think at some point, or they forget that this is happening, even while they're at work doing their accounting. Mm-hmm. It's like, this doesn't just stop.
No, it has been proven, right? We are little mini batteries. Mm-hmm. And we give off electrical impulse. So there is more to it than just a feeling that you get. You are, in fact, always receiving and giving a sort of input. Now, again, I want to take the spooky out of it. I want to take the supernatural out of it.
Yeah.
That's the part that bugs me. I think people get freaked out about intuition because they think, oh God, I'm opening myself up to something. Right? Something could happen. And it's all like a horror movie, folklore. They think, you get what I mean? Like they think,
right. It's kind of like they watched the Ouija board movies one too many times.
Right. And like, okay, the Ouija board is a great example because people don't realize that is exactly what the Ouija board is supposed to be. It's an intuitive tool.
Right.
But, because of all of these beliefs that have come about, that you're going to let something in, or you're not going to be able to control it, or it's going to stay with you.
And if you don't follow this pattern of behavior or whatever, it's going to...
And look, the Ouija board, spirit boards, because Ouija is an invention of, a board game company.
Right.
But spirit boards, yeah, don't get me wrong. They're not a toy. They're not to be messed with. But the intuition piece of like sitting down with another witch or anyone for that matter, really just, someone who's interested and working on intuitive practices back and forth does not open a doorway to anything other than a stronger friendship and connection with the other person. That's all it is. People who are very in tune to one another, this is where you hear about people going, I'm thinking of a number. What number am I thinking of? Right? Or what color? Or, like the flashcard game where, there's a picture of a sailboat and the other person has to guess. That's what we're talking about.
Right.
And it does, but these kinds of bonds...
Well, they're not mysterious, spooky, or anything.
And
they're very common.
They're not special.
No, they're very common. They are super common.
This is what people get mad at me when I say this. They're not special. So I have a super close friend, and he still to this day, he tells this story, okay, anecdotally, because he sees it as the bond, right? He sees it as like, this is how I knew she was my best friend. And I just sit there and go, oh God. Anyway, we were at work one day together, and he and I are very talkative when we work together, and we banter back and forth a lot, and we're just kind of silly and we're goofy. And anyway, one day we're sitting at our desks respectively, and I just went, Aruba. That was it. I just said the word Aruba. I just blurted out Aruba. And he goes, what did you just say? Aruba? And he goes, come here. On his computer screen was a picture of a beach in Aruba. And he goes, how the hell? And I just went, I just shrugged my shoulders. Now, internally, I'm laughing because I'm like, yeah, you ding dong. We spend 8 hours a day together, right? We go to lunch together. We spend time with each other outside of work. We've become really close friends. Like, yeah, I'm seeing what you're seeing. You were broadcasting a signal strong enough that you sent me Aruba. But this happens. This happens all the time. There's no difference between that and when you're sitting down, right, with a family member or, again, a close friend, and you both blurt out the same thing at the same time in reaction to something else.
Or, God forbid, you mentioned to the other one, hey, I happen to be craving.
Right. Me too. Yeah.
Oh,
Jinx,
God.
you owe me a Coke. No. That's... But people love to see, right? We love to see patterns. We love to see the coincidence or it's not coincidence. We do this all the time. one way or another, we are influencing the people around us.
In very subtle ways. I mean, we're getting influenced
And
too.
sometimes not so subtle.
Oh, God forbid, no.
I love the
And
people.
especially if chocolate's involved.
Oh, God. Seriously. Or coffee. I love the people who study, mentalism and the minute body language stuff.
Right.
Because they can pick up on so many things. And to the average person, it looks like, oh, it's psychic. Is it? Or is it a trained eye?
Or do you still consider this a form of intuition? I mean, because there was what was that whole show, Psych, where that was the whole premise of the show, was the guy wasn't actually psychic, he was just very observant.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the difference? Is there a difference?
Ooh. To me, it's training and it's discipline. I think in the TV show Psych, right, they wanted us to believe that he was just very gifted with these observational skills.
Yeah.
In real life, nobody is that gifted. We have to work on that. Not nobody, but very few people.
It is a trained behavior. It's something
you learn.
You learn.
You learn how to be that observant. You learn how to predict other people. I mean, and there's a lot to this in terms of our brains and how interestingly they work. Like there are and this is what mentalists do. This is a form of magicianry, right?
Right.
Mentalists will, when you see a large audience and a mentalist does that whole thing where they're like, I'm thinking of a number.
Right.
There's actually a science to this.
But there's like that guy that will stand out there on the street corner and he'll take off your tie or something while doing something else to you. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of it, show you how much stuff he took off of you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's sleight of hand. I'm talking about strictly the mental stuff.
Right.
The mental stuff is literally like they will put a number, they'll write a number down on a piece of paper and then, it's the number that you had in your head. But there's a formula to it. And so there's a lot of ways in which this stuff works. Like, again, I think proximity is so interesting. Like, for a parent, if you've got a kid who's constantly got the sniffles and has a runny nose.
Right.
If you hear that kid sniff from across the room and you come into the room with a box of tissues and hand them one, you look psychic. Not really.
Nope.
Right? You have trained yourself to be very attuned to the needs of someone else. And that's often what happens in families and again, close-knit situations. But not everybody is great at that. Some people are very, 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 very self-absorbed, and they never learn those behaviors. They never venture beyond that. Ironically, it's the person who is incredibly self-absorbed that has the hardest time with intuition. You would think it would be the opposite.
You would think.
Mm-hmm. It somehow creates a barrier. I don't even profess to understand it. But somebody who's very selfish, self-absorbed, right? Yeah, they have a really hard time. Instead of it being intuitive, it's more like, if we're talking about divination, if we're talking about tarot,
right?
It's more like wishful thinking in terms of the cards they pull.
Right.
It's not really an intuitive reading. Yeah.
No. Matter of fact, the most people I've seen that do that are just whatever definition came out of the book.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot to be said, too, about, well, there's a lot of rule breaking when it comes to intuitive anything.
Right.
Right? There are whole practitioners who use tarot and have never read a single definition of a single card.
Yes.
They use
Ghost.
them their own way. Yep.
I know several of them.
Mm-hmm.
I've trained several of them.
Mm-hmm. Yep. They don't give two shits about what that card is supposed to be. They're using it in their own fashion for their own practice. And that's totally fine. I see no issue with that.
Matter of fact, I encourage it myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do too. I think that studying the cards to some extent, I get it. Especially, I think there are, I don't want to call them trigger. Trigger is the wrong word. I was going to say trigger card, but that's not it. There are some cards that hold significance to the reader.
Right.
And
some of the meanings do.
Yes.
In a broader sense, in a more of a broader sense than a specific. So knowing the more broader is not always a bad thing.
Right.
Understanding that the death card really represents change, not necessarily.
Of course. But I feel like some, there's people who might pull, a 9 of Wands, and it has a very heavy, very significant meaning to them as the reader. I might pull the 9 of Wands and just go, 9 of Wands. Doesn't hold that deep a place for me. You know what I'm saying? That's all it is. So that's part of it. It's making the practice your own. I also feel like intuitive readers are not very elaborate, like with the spreads and things. Most like, I'm a big fan of the 3 card, the past, present, future, bam, bam, bam. It's because to me, if we're trying to be intuitive, the more time you spend with it, the more you overthink it.
Right.
It doesn't get better. It actually gets worse. So quick tends to be more effective.
Where I'm a little bit different. I like the Celtic spread, the Celtic cross spread, more than I like the 3 cards. But I will do a 3 card. I mean, I ain't, I'm not going to run from the room.
But see, I find that funny because you have to hold that place of what I'm going to call emptiness.
Right.
Longer.
Yes.
Yeah. To do a full spread like that. It's not that it's impossible. It's just, it's a lot of discipline.
It's just, I think it's just what I got used to doing. It's what I started with, and it's what I've always.
That's fair. Yeah.
Now be careful. Don't fall into that trap.
No. But
Keep moving your styles around.
There's so many ways of doing that, right? Of like, there's even things like intuitive drawing, intuitive writing. I mean,
the auto writing.
Yeah. Just ways to tap in to what the hell is really going on underneath all the external. It's a lot. And I think, so much of it again comes down to modern man is at a disadvantage in some of these ways. It's worse now.
I mean, we don't get to use our intuition on a daily basis like they used to. Ooh, there's a tiger there.
Mm-hmm. But I also think, the bombardment of information. We are, oh my God, I mean, social media alone, I don't even understand, right? It's input. Right? We're constantly.
No, it was that way during the first 24-hour news cycle thing we went into back in the day. And it's only accelerated since then.
That's what I mean. But now, because it's not only input, it's constantly changing, right? What it is, the message, the video, the thing, it's changing so rapidly. We look at TikTok, it's like, how are we going to train those kids to quiet their minds enough one day when they go, I want to learn how to read cards. Oh, okay. How do we turn off input and start going broadcast when they have no means or no concept of how to do it?
Well, how do we do it if we can't just rip the phone out from their hands and go, you can not have it back for 5 months?
But that's what I'm saying. There's no quiet time. There's no... This is where I think pagan parenting has to take a different approach if these are the skills you want to teach your kids later. Because if your child cannot function for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, a half an hour in silence with only their own thoughts, how are they ever going to learn to be intuitive?
How are they ever going to learn to meditate?
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I mean. It's a huge part of it. I mean, I do find it really interesting now that, like, we don't send kids to the corner anymore, right? It used to be that was a timeout. Timeouts are not a thing anymore.
Okay, so intuitive and meditation we know helps, all right? Now, for those who sit there and go, but I can't meditate, do you actually believe this?
No.
Why not?
No, and this is part of what I think the problem is. I know so many people, adults included,
yes,
that are just incapable of sitting in the nothing. From the minute they wake up to the second they go to sleep, their brains are bombarded constantly by noise, sound, images, because they cannot be alone with their own thoughts. And I'm still very much in the other camp of, like, if somebody turns a TV on within 5 minutes of me waking, they're probably getting a remote control thrown at their head. Because I'm like, no, leave me with my thoughts for a moment. I can't yet. I need a minute. Let me have my cup of coffee. It's funny because the same people, if you get them out of doors, if you get them, right into a very scenic nature setting, what do? They sit there in silence and they go, oh, it's so peaceful here. Oh. It's just as peaceful in your backyard.
And they
but
look
you don't
jittery
do
as
this.
hell. Because they're wanting to check their phone, but they don't have a signal way out here.
But they are more likely to be inspired or to be in awe of nature in that moment, which I think is great. But I'm, again, of that mindset of, why did you have to leave to achieve that?
True.
You could do this anytime, anywhere. So that's where it gets tough.
You have to take those moments.
Intuition is about seeing the divine in the ordinary and connecting to it in the ordinary. It's not waiting for some spectacular thing to happen. It's not how our lives work. Speaking of which, I see more coffee in my future.
All right. I agree with you.
Thanks for listening. Join us next week for another episode. Pagan Coffee Talk is brought to you by Life Temple and Seminary. Please visit us at lifetempleseminary.org for more information, as well as links to our social media: Facebook, Discord, Twitter, YouTube, and Reddit.
We travel down this trodden path, a maze of stone and mire. Just hold my hand as we pass by a sea of blazing pyres. And so it is the end of our days, so walk with me till morning breaks. And so it is the end of our days, so walk with me till morning